Thank you, Vince.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for allowing me
Yeah.
this opportunity to be with you virtually. I'm so disappointed that I could not be there in person because I've heard so many wonderful things about this convening from Julie and from others. It is an extraordinary day in Rochester, and it just breaks my heart that I can't be there with you to be together in community in person. Um, I am very honored and privileged to serve as the Chief Government Relations Officer at Feeding America. I have been in this capacity for over 3 years. Prior to that, as was said in the introduction, I was the CEO of one of the partner food banks in the Feeding America network, that being Feeding San Diego. And so I'm the first person to have this role who combines extensive background in politics and government with an extensive experience as a food bank leader. And in both my public sector work and in my nonprofit work in this shared mission, I have focused myself on issues around hunger and solving hunger. So it is bringing together the two halves of my career to have the opportunity now to lead this wonderful team in Washington, D.C., who coordinate federal policy advocacy and are increasingly helping with state policy advocacy. Um, I don't have to tell you all, these are extraordinary times in Washington. The public policy agenda is very fluid. It is swinging between various poles and axes. It is very difficult to anticipate what's going to be coming from one day to the next. And that is true within Congress as much as it is within the administration. Um, one thing that we do very, very well across the entire Feeding America network, but also and especially across all the agency partners who are in community together in this shared mission, which is that we center ourselves on the experience of people facing hunger. Our neighbors facing hunger are at the core of every public policy position that we take. They're at the core of every advocacy strategy that we take. We are assiduously and strictly nonpartisan. We do not engage in the politics side of public policy. We engage on the policy side, and we focus those efforts very specifically on people facing hunger. I like to think of this work in three broad categories. First is serving the line. Second is shortening the line, and third is ending the line. And serving the line is the core mission of all of us in this room. And it is making sure that our neighbors facing hunger have a consistent access to a diverse array of healthy, nutritious foods in a high dignity environment, and that they are respected as individuals from wherever they come and wherever they find themselves there. And we aim to serve. And that means, amongst many other things, it means having enough food. About 23% of the food that flows through the Feeding America network is USDA provided. It is federal commodities. It is food that is purchased through a number of different programs and finds its way to the agency partners and to the direct distribution models operated by the food bank itself. That federal commodity food comes mainly in the form of TFAP and CSFP, the Commodity Supplemental Food Program. CSFP, of course, is a senior food box program, and TFAP, of course, purchases commodities from farmers and other agricultural producers and brings them right to the loading docks of the food banks, and even provides some storage and distribution funding to help offset the costs of distributing that food. It's not nearly enough. It's never enough to cover the full cost, and we end up using philanthropic dollars to close that gap. The the three main ways the TFAP gets funded is the original TFAP entitlement program. It's authorized in the Farm Bill. It was actually founded by President Ronald Reagan. During President Trump's first term, he found a second way of augmenting TFAP, which was to use a financing mechanism called the Commodity Credit Corporation, or CCC. And for the first time in the history of the TFAP program, and the first time in the history of the Commodity Credit Corporation, President Trump used CCC dollars to purchase food from farmers and move it to food banks and agencies through the TFAP program. And in all, over $2 billion was invested in those food purchases. President Biden continued that path because the USDA Secretary, Tom Vilsack, recognized that all of you in that room are struggling under unprecedented demand, and that the need for augmentation of TFAP for more than just what the Farm Bill would ordinarily provide had never been more acute. This is the first time in the history of food banking that we have had record high demand at distributions and record low unemployment in the country. Usually those indices move together. Usually we see higher unemployment leading to increased food insecurity and increased demand at food distributions. Um, that means that we're in a dangerous moment because there's very little resiliency left in the system. We are maximizing our ability to commit resources to the mission and barely able to serve the populations that we're already serving. So, some string of natural disasters or some policy changes to SNAP or some other economic softening or downturn, anything that would cause even more increase in demand at food distributions is going to exceed our capacity. So recognizing that fragility, under President Biden, USDA invested about $1 billion a year of CCC funds into TFAP. And then in their final year, they announced a $500 million supplemental investment, which was half of what we were expecting, and that was disappointing. And then it is that $500 million that was then canceled by the new administration as they seek to review all of their CCC investments. I don't want to go too far into the weeds on this, but let me just say that each agriculture secretary has discretion over the CCC dollars, and each administration makes its own decisions about how it's going to invest those dollars. It is the case that when President Biden was elected, his USDA terminated a CCC food box program that was started under President Trump's first term. And now with President Trump coming back to office, the CCC TFAP investments that were announced by the prior administration have been canceled. So there is some historical precedent for this. What has no historical precedent is the level of demand and need that is being reflected across all of your agency distributions. And so to have orders scheduled, to have delivery dates and product types on the food bank manifest, and then for those trucks to not show up and those pallets to disappear, has created an extraordinary hardship for food banks all across the country, an extraordinary challenge. So we are working with USDA. We're trying to encourage them to accelerate the consideration of how they intend to invest CCC dollars. And we are encouraging them to include us, meaning the entire Feeding America network, in their plans for how they're going to invest their CCC dollars. A third source of funding for TFAP happens to be what's called Section 32. And I'm not going to get into all the background and history on that, but it's an old New Deal program that captures 30% of tariff revenue collected by the U.S. Customs every year and commits it to purchasing commodities that are in surplus. So if there's a glut of figs or a glut of shrimp or a glut of corn, USDA can act as a buyer in the marketplace, buying up the excess commodities to support prices and support American agriculture. The program has worked really, really well for about 90 years. And what President Trump's USDA has done in the last week has been to significantly accelerate the use of Section 32 funds to purchase food that can be distributed through the TFAP pipeline. The first announcement was up to $261 million of fruits and vegetables and tree nuts. There are more announcements coming. There will be more investments of Section 32 dollars. Will what they're accelerating on the Section 32 side completely offset what was cut from the CCC side? I can't answer that question because we don't yet know the full extent of the Section 32 purchases that the administration is going to be able to achieve this year. But there is a recognition of the severity of the problem. There has been obviously a lot of media attention to the problem, and we're going to be continuing to work with the administration on all three funding sources to make sure that TFAP entitlement from the Farm Bill continues to be administered and food continues to be delivered as it is. It was never interrupted. and Section 32 purchases continue to be delivered, and that has not been interrupted. And we hope that as they consider their CCC investments, that they will consider purchasing food for the TFAP program as they did during President Trump's first term. So all of that is about serving the line. It's about making sure we have enough food tomorrow and a week from tomorrow and a month from tomorrow to meet the needs in our communities. But shortening the line is every bit as important. And programs like SNAP and school meal programs and the summer food service program and the child and adult care food program, these are things that make it possible for people to solve hunger without going to a charitable food distribution. With the dignity of being able to have purchasing power at a local grocery store, or a child being able to enter a school cafeteria and access healthy, nutritious meals, or attend an after-school program, or rural children being able to get remotely distributed meals during summer months. These are all important measures that allow people to solve hunger a different way than leaning into this very, very robust network that's expressed by your presence here today. So when we defend programs like SNAP, which we are doing very, very vigorously in the current congressional environment, we do so because we know from speaking with neighbors experiencing hunger how critically important SNAP is to their dignity and their quality of life. We also know, unfortunately, that for many families, the benefits are inadequate, and people turn to you and your food distributions when their EBT cards have a zero balance and they're awaiting the beginning of the next benefit cycle. We also know from our own research that about half of the people experiencing food insecurity in the United States do not qualify for SNAP benefits. So 100% of that population is leaning into you and your solutions because they don't have the option of accessing the SNAP program. So our goals for SNAP in Congress are to increase the eligibility so that all people experiencing hunger have access to the program, to enhance the adequacy of the benefits so that once people go through the bureaucracy of getting onto the program, they have enough funds on the EBT card to feed themselves for an entire month, and to increase the accessibility of the program, to reduce that bureaucracy, to make it easier for the people the program is designed to help to actually enjoy the benefits of the program. And then fourth and finally, to ensure that we continue to respect the dignity and autonomy of people to make the right food choices for their family. And that can be based on medical needs. It could be based on cultural needs. It could be based on family demographics. We all know that families with lots of young kids are going to want different food types than families that consist of two seniors. So we need to respect the dignity and autonomy of families to make the food choices that are right for them. So third and finally is ending hunger work, or root cause policy advocacy. We are looking for innovative ways to help to help reduce the cause of food insecurity by reducing poverty. And I would point to a couple of examples. One being during the pandemic, the child tax credit received a very significant enhancement that allowed families to access the credit without even filing a tax return. They were actually issued their rebate under the child tax credit on a monthly basis. Now, what happened when that was in place? Remarkable reduction in child poverty in the United States. By some studies, estimates up to 50% of child poverty was eliminated by enhancing the child tax credit. Unfortunately, that enhancement expired, and we lost in the Senate by one vote toward making that enhancement permanent. There are both very conservative Republicans and very progressive Democrats and everybody in between who want to reinstate some version of this enhanced child tax credit, and we're hoping that we can get that done. Secondly, there are a lot of people focused on the idea of benefit cliffs, which, when somebody is able to work and is engaging in the job training and the career building that helps them to reach a level of self-sufficiency and economic advancement, we as a country need to remove these highly punitive step measures that take away far more benefits from those families than they're earning in additional income as they progress up the wage ladder. So when you earn one more dollar per hour of income and lose the equivalent of $3 an hour with the benefits, it removes that incentive and it removes that reward for economic advancement. So we want to get rid of these benefit cliffs and the idea that people get punished for doing the very thing these programs are designed to help people achieve. Um, Third would be food is medicine. I mean, the new HHS Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has been speaking about the need to have people have access to healing through nutrition. The idea that drugs and medicines and surgeries and rehabs aren't enough if somebody's experiencing nutrition insecurity, if somebody is lacking access, consistent access to nutritious food. Now, you all already know that. That's not a surprise to you. But it's a surprise to a lot of policymakers in Washington that they can save an enormous amount of money by investing in food as medicine programs. Studies show that healthcare costs for food insecure people are at least $2,000 higher than it is for people who are not experiencing food insecurity. So one way to reduce healthcare costs is to reduce food insecurity amongst the population that is experiencing illness or disease or trauma. Expecting people to be able to heal from disease and trauma without having a strong foundation in nutrition is a fool's errand. It's not a viable solution. So those are some of the examples of the root cause poverty issues that are being talked about on the Hill today in a kind of a bipartisan way. And we hope to be able to advance some of those policy agendas. There are other really big things happening in Washington. There are massive reductions happening across federal departments and agencies. Those things are of great concern to us because many of the programs that USDA is tasked with administering are highly complex programs. And if we don't have the right people in government, in those chairs and at those computers administering those programs, it could cause problems for SNAP. It could cause problems for TFAP. It could cause problems for other programs like the food distribution program on Indian reservations. So we really want to keep a close eye on that and to make sure that USDA is keeping the seasoned professional and highly trained staff that they need to administer these complex programs. We know that Congress is talking about a budget reconciliation plan, which may or may not happen. In my mind, it's about a 50-50 probability as to whether that will actually come to fruition. It's not something Congress has to do. It's not in the Constitution. It's not mandated. But when Congress chooses to do it, it can be a very powerful tool for changing the underlying economics of the federal budget. There's limits on it, and it has to, in this instance, in this moment, it's going to require every single Republican member of the House of Representatives and nearly every single Republican senator to agree on a package. And that, as you all know from reading the newspapers, is difficult arithmetic these days because there are so many different points of view on the component issues of the federal budget. So I'm not predicting whether it's going to happen or not happen. What I am saying is that we're lifting up the voices of our neighbors facing hunger. We are advocating to Congress, not just the national organization, but all the Feeding America organizations, and gratefully, thankfully, many of you, to say that these deep cuts to SNAP would have a immediate and direct negative impact on people who are doing their level best to return to work, to have a pathway to self-sufficiency, or there's a very significant, in fact, a majority of the SNAP population who are seniors who deserve dignity and grace in their golden years. They're children who are the most innocent among us. They are people with disabilities, people who cannot reasonably or authentically be asked to return to the workplace and deserve access to SNAP benefits in order to stay nourished and have dignity. So there are some key attributes of our shared work, some key constituencies. One is I was really inspired to hear the audio before I joined you of folks who are getting awards for the incredible work that they have done in your communities, and I applaud you for those successes. Amongst them were faith-based organizations. And this administration has expressed a very sincere, open desire to partner with, hear from faith-based organizations. There are about 60,000 agencies in the Feeding America network. 25,000 of them, 42%, are faith-based. So when we talk about faith-based organizations within the Feeding America network, it's not something that we aspire to. It's who we are. it's an honest expression of who we are as an organization, that almost half of the distribution partners within the Feeding America network are faith-based organizations. And so we recently sent a letter to USDA highlighting some of these data points on faith-based agencies. We asked leaders of faith-based agencies if they would be willing to sign. We were on a very tight timeline, so if you didn't get invited to sign, please don't take offense. But in a very short amount of time, I thought we were going to get maybe 100 to 150 of our 25,000. We ended up getting 1,500 signatures on that letter. And I think that was a really powerful and important moment, because it was an opportunity for faith-based agencies within the constellation of Feeding America agencies to have a unique and important moment, an important voice to say, hey, we're here. And if you want to help faith-based agencies to serve communities, start with the Feeding America network, because there's 25,000 of them already in community, already serving the neighborhoods, already fulfilling their mission. And so I applaud you for that. A second thing I'll say is that food banks have been in deep and meaningful partnership with agriculture since the very first food bank was opened in Phoenix, Arizona in the late 60s by John Van Hengel. The partnership with farmers and agricultural producers has more importance and resonance in this moment, because the things that are happening with tariffs and a potential trade wars, this puts American agriculture in a very precarious place. We need to be partners with agriculture. We already are, but we need to be advocacy partners with agriculture. We need to make sure that when we talk about paying pick and pack out fees, or we talk about the benefits of the LFPA program, where we partnered local farmers with local food banks. We talk about the donations, just the heartfelt, generous donations that come to Feeding America food banks from American agriculture. These are relationships that go very, very deep, and they're an important catalyst, not just to making sure that farmers are made whole and making sure that surplus commodities make it to food banks so they can serve families in need, but making sure that we have a unified advocacy voice, that we have shared priorities. And so my boss, Claire Babineau-Fontenot, the CEO of Feeding America, has been working with Zippy Duvall, the American Farm Bureau Federation, and other agricultural leaders. But impressively, a lot of that sort of ag food bank partnership advocacy work has been happening at the local food bank level as well. And it's a very helpful and very powerful thing. So,
hey, Vince, can you hear me okay?
I can.
This is Mitch.
Hi, Mitch.
First of all, thank you. I don't want to interrupt your flow, but I also want to make sure we have a couple of time for questions before your time is up. And I think that's a very good segue. So thinking about this food bank right here, I don't know how much you can see in your video, but we have probably about 400 people or so here representing 10 counties. We have some counties and some congressional districts that are very blue, some counties and congressional districts that are very red, and a lot of farms and agriculture interspersed throughout all of it. What kind of advice do you have for us as an individual food bank and the network represented here in terms of how to best advocate over the next several months?
So it's a great question, Mitch, and I'm glad that we pivoted to Q&A, because I had just run out of material. I said everything I wanted to say, but I appreciate so much the pivot and the question, because as you look at your agricultural relationships today, they probably, I'm speaking to the room writ large here, not to Mitch, but I mean you probably have focused those relationships on actually getting food from the food bank. I mean, from the farm to your agency, or in some cases to the food bank. It probably, there are personal relationships engaged that you could then pivot and begin to talk about, hey, we want to put a meeting together with our member of Congress or with our senator, or we want to go to this town hall meeting, or we want to go meet with the staff of the Congress member. Would you be willing to come with us? Would you be willing to just come to the meeting and attest to the importance of the relationship you have with our agency or with our food bank? I think also that in terms of the elected officials themselves, a lot of nonprofit leaders and faith-based leaders are under the misimpression that members of Congress are not within your scope of work, that it's politics, It's something that's not intersecting with your mission. And I have to tell you, nothing could be further from the truth. The members of Congress really do want to hear from you. They spend a lot of time in Washington, but none of them are elected in Washington. Every one of them has to represent the constituents back here in these 10 counties. And when agency leaders and food bank leaders come and talk to members of Congress, I guarantee you, no one's going to ever say, you have no business telling me what you think. Every one of them is going to express appreciation and gratitude that you took the time to talk to them, because they learn, and you're the best teachers. All the research we've done shows that of everybody who lives in those 10 counties, the people sitting in that room right now are regarded as the foremost authorities on the issue of hunger. There is no one more credible than you on the issue of hunger. And so if we want to educate our policymakers about the decisions they're going to make, we fight with one arm tied behind our backs if the folks who have the most credibility don't use their voice. So I really, really encourage you to get out of your comfort zone if that's what it takes, but to recognize that in this system, we cannot expect somebody else to tell our elected officials what's going on in our communities. We have to step up to the mic, or step up to the meeting, or have a coffee shop chat, but we have to let them know what's really going on in our communities.
Thanks, Vince. And unfortunately, one of the byproducts of your terrible travel arrangement today is we were going to sit down and talk about building out a federal advocacy agenda with Foodlink's advocacy committee, and I'm sure that we'll find time to follow up in the next couple of weeks. Regardless, I'm curious, is there a sense of timing? I mean, obviously, there's the urgency of right now, and we're seeing it with the loads that we got canceled. But from your vantage point, is there a particular time that we should be reaching out to our congressional leaders around here?
Yeah, there are moments of peak advocacy opportunity. So at some point this year, we think there's going to be a farm bill. So in the 6 to 8 weeks leading up to the House and Senate Agriculture Committee's approval of that farm bill, there's going to be a need for increased advocacy pitch. Right now, there's consideration of this budget reconciliation process that threatens the SNAP program. So at some point in the next 2 months, that's going to be a moment of opportunity. But I think almost the more important thing is to be in community with your elected officials on a sustained cadence, on a year-round regular basis, even if it's just 3 times a year, even if it's sometimes a letter or a phone call instead of a meeting. But I think you build relationship. The number one mistake that people make in advocacy is they walk into an office and they say, here's what I believe, and if you don't believe it, you're wrong. That is fast and easy, but it is not effective, because you start from where you're at and you've challenged the other person to either come be where you're at or to be wrong. Imagine as an elected official how distasteful that approach is. What's much harder to do, but much more effective, is to do some reading on the elected officials' website. Look at some of the things they've written. Look at some of their votes. And Mitch has lots of resources to help you with this. But to understand where they're at on SNAP, where they're at on TFAP, to understand what their point of view is. And in front of every elected official, I don't care where they are in the political spectrum or what party they belong to, there is a zone of opportunity in front of that elected official. And if you know where they are, you will see that zone of opportunity. So you may not be able to get them to commit to 100% of your SNAP agenda, but if they care passionately about the members of the military, you can talk to them about why Congress makes it harder for members of the military to be eligible for SNAP benefits. And when they're outraged by that, and they work with you to solve that, and then you can start talking about why the SNAP benefits that those military families are accessing aren't sufficient for so you start with something you agree on, like a Venn diagram. You work in the overlap, you find something to work on that builds community, trust, and respect, that then opens the door to having the tougher conversations and to moving people down the path toward where you want them to be. But my advice is don't approach elected officials with an all or nothing. I need you on this list of these 10 things. Start by figuring out something that you know they can say yes to, and work from there to the harder things where you're going to have to actually win their hearts and minds.
Great. Thank you so much, Vince. And listen, one of the biggest disappointments is that we didn't get to feed you this incredible lunch from Wegmans. For those of you, I don't know if Julie mentioned this in the intro, but Vince actually has ties to Rochester. Some of you may have remember the name Midge Costanza. Anyone remember Midge Costanza? Vince, you want to tell folks about your relationship with Midge?
Yeah, so Midge was a Rochester City Council member who was selected by President Jimmy Carter to be the first woman to be a senior policy advisor to the president. Midge was in that Rochester way, very direct, and had some very strong opinions. And she eventually retired to San Diego around 1992, and she and I became fast friends, and we worked together on issues in San Diego. While she was in the White House, she was so controversial that she was, essentially a national news topic. The Doonesbury cartoon strip actually made multiple cartoons that featured Midge Costanza. And about a year ago, I was honored to be in San Diego for the dedication of a plaza in Little Italy that I helped contribute toward, which is dedicated to the memory of Midge Costanza. So on behalf of all the people in the country whose lives have been improved by Midge, I can just say thank you, Rochester, for sending such an incredible person into the world.
Well, I'll tell you, Vince. I had a little bit